Welcome to Miyconst Hardware. Today I have got this Nvidia P106M graphical adapter, which is an MXM module. Yes, I have got this MXM module and I have slammed Intel box cooler on top of this adapter. Those who are following me on Instagram, Discord, or maybe my other Miyconst Clips YouTube channel probably know a little bit about this adapter already. But for these who did not have a chance to take a look or simply don't follow me there, let's start with the technical specification of this weird MXM adapter. The GPU die itself on this P106M is exactly the same as on GTX 1060. We have GP106, but the variant is different. Unfortunately, P106M is limited to just 4GB of GDDR5 memory on 128-bit bus. Standard Nvidia GTX 1060 has 6GB of video memory and 192-bit bus. This is not all though. P106M also has reduced clock speeds. GPU clock is just 1300 MHz, while GTX 1060 has 1700 MHz and can be overclocked to 2 GHz. Memory clock is 1500 on P106M and about 2 GHz on GTX 1060. Since P106M is an MXM module, the power consumption is limited to 75 watts, while Nvidia GTX 1060 can pull more than 120 watts. What's more important is that Nvidia P106M does not have any video outputs, and I will be talking about this a little bit later. So, according to the technical specification, this P106M Nvidia graphical adapter or graphical device would not perform the same as GTX 1060 because the specs are simply not there, but it's still nice to test it and see what we can squeeze out of this MXM module. And for testing we have three options. The first one and the simplest one is if you have a laptop or a mini computer with an MXM slot. In that case you just need to put it inside and launch it up and it just works. For this configuration, I have got myself HP EliteDesk 800 G1 mini computer, which has an MXM slot. This P106M simply does not fit inside the HP computer, that's why I had to pull out the motherboard from HP computer to be able to connect this P106M. If there will be an interest and enough demand, I will also make a dedicated video about the HP computer, but for now we just have benchmark numbers to see how this P106M performs when it has full MXM PCI Express X16 connection with the rest of the system. The second option how to test this P106M is to use MXM to PCI Express X1 adapter from AliExpress, which you can buy for rather cheap these days. Of course, it is absolutely pointless to use PCI Express X1 connection when you want to run some games, because the bandwidth is simply so low that the performance will be reduced significantly. But for scientific reasons, it is still interesting to test it and see how it actually behaves if you use PCI Express X1 adapter, and that's what I'm going to do in this video. And the last but very expensive option is to use a proper MXM to PCI Express X16 adapter. Unfortunately, these adapters are very expensive and I'm not going to test it in this video, but I might be able to test it in the future. Such adapter on AliExpress would cost 150 to 200 euros, which I find absolutely unreasonable. Instead of paying this much for an adapter, you can simply buy a standard GTX 1060 on the second-hand market for about the same money, but getting a much better performance and a standard graphics card which you can sell later on. Once you have figured out how you want to use this P106M, you also need to figure out how to cool it down. In case of a laptop, you most likely have a dedicated GPU cooler which you can simply mount onto the graphical adapter, but in case of a mini computer or in case of an adapter into a desktop computer, you need to figure something out how to keep this one cool. I have tried multiple different heatsinks and I have also tried to make myself a customly made heatsink with the custom holes to mount it onto the P106M, but after a while I have realized that the simplest possible solution is to just slap on Intel box cooler on top. For this, I have got myself a few M2 screws and M2 extenders. I have 4 screws screwed into the back of the card. Then I mount a few M4 extenders on top. On top of that, I slam the Intel box cooler and use some extra screws with washers to mount this cooler secure onto the GPU. On top of this construction, you can also put the standard Intel fan, which comes with the box cooler. Additionally, if you wish, you can also add a few radiators onto the memory chips and the VRAM zone. I have added some Raspberry Pi radiators onto the memory chips, but VRAM in this case is staying so cool that you don't even need to bother about cooling it somehow separately. Okay, we have figured out how to use this MXM adapter, we have figured out how to cool it down. The next question is what drivers to use. Nvidia P106M is not a standard Nvidia graphics card and it is not official. You cannot download drivers for this thingy, and if you try to install standard drivers, they simply refuse to work because it does not detect that there is an Nvidia adapter in the system. After reading some forums and trying different solutions, I have figured out that the easiest and the best solution is to just use modified drivers for Nvidia GTX 1060. Detailed instruction on how to do that is available on your screen, is available in my Google Slides by the link in the video description, but in short, what you have to do is first, download the latest Nvidia GTX 1060 compatible drivers. Second, you need to unpack the drivers and do some modifications in the nv_dsp.inf file. In this file, you need to find all the lines associated with Nvidia GTX 1060 with the code 1C06. Copy each of these lines and replace the device ID to 1C36, which is the device ID of P106M. Save the file and then you have got your modified Nvidia drivers. At this moment, you may try to install the drivers, but the drivers will refuse to go through because you need to disable a device driver signature check in Windows. How to do that you can also find in my Google Slides presentation, but after disabling signature check, you can install the modified drivers as usual drivers. After installing the drivers, I would recommend to enable security check back because some games will refuse to launch without this check. If you're lazy and don't want to modify the latest drivers, you can use outdated Nvidia drivers, which you can download from the Gigabyte page for a mining card based on P106 die. This one is Gigabyte P106-100. Link will be available in the video description as well as in my Google Slides presentation. So we have figured out how to use this P106M, we have figured out how to cool it, and we have figured out what drivers to use. And now it's time to do some benchmarks. For benchmarking this thingy, I have got myself two systems. The first one will be based on Asus Z87 motherboard with a Xeon E3 1265LV3. I have used this CPU because I wanted to have the same CPU between HP mini computer and the desktop configuration where I will be testing PCI-E X1 connection as well as a standard GTX 1060. For the memory, I have two sticks, 8GB each, DDR3 1866 from Corsair. Then I have two SSDs, system drive and games drive, power supply, EVGA Supernova 750p2, Windows 10 x64. The second system consists of HP mini computer EliteDesk 800 G1. As I have mentioned, this USDT mini computer has an MXM slot, thus I will be able to connect this P106 adapter using the full PCI-E X16 width. Unfortunately, here I cannot use DDR3 1866 memory, that's why I'm limited to two SODIMMs DDR3 1600 CL11. This configuration is slightly slower than on Asus Z87 motherboard, but roughly the performance is equal. The rest of the system is identical to the desktop test configuration, a part of the power supply. For the power supply, I had to get a bit more powerful power unit for 230 watt, because the standard HP power supply is supplying only about 75 watt, and this graphics card can consume 75 watt on its own. A few final notes before I go into testing of this Nvidia P106M. First of all, I'm very thankful for my subscriber who was able to buy it in the United States and ship it to me in Sweden. And the second one is that eBay seller claims that this P106M was pulled out from a car. He refused to specify which car was using this P106M, and he also does not know or does not want to tell what it is used for, but it's just an interesting fact that eBay seller is saying that it was taken out from a car. Obviously, before running my benchmarks, I attempted to overclock this P106M adapter, but as expected, everything is absolutely locked. MSI Afterburner does not have any possibilities to adjust the GPU clock frequency or video memory frequency. I have also attempted to use different BIOS options for Nvidia GTX 1060 graphics card as well as Nvidia Quadro graphics cards, which are using this same GPU die P106 but with no lag. With some GTX 1060 BIOSes, the graphics card was attempting to start and attempting to do something, but I have got a blue screen with the video memory management because P106M has 4GB of video memory and GTX 1060 comes either with the 3 or 6GB variants. Also, as far as I know, Nvidia has locked all possibilities to make some custom modified BIOS options for these graphics cards, but if you know such an option how I can overclock this P106M adapter, please let me know and I will really appreciate it, because if I would be able to increase the clock speeds of this P106M, then the performance will be much higher than what you will see in the near future. Now let's take a look at some synthetic performance. Blender BMW, Blender Classroom and V-Ray benchmarks are demonstrating that P106M is about 60% of the standard GTX 1060 performance. It is rather unexpected, but PCI Express X1 and MXM PCI Express X16 configurations are delivering almost identical performance. This can be explained by the fact that these benchmarks do not require more than 4GB of video memory, thus there is no data transfer from the computer to the graphics card and back. All benchmarking data is uploaded to the GPU at once, and then the GPU during the benchmark does not utilize PCI Express bandwidth. The next one will be 3D Mark Firestrike. Here, much to my surprise, PCI Express X1 also doesn't cripple performance that much. Overall, the performance is staying around 50–60% of Nvidia GTX 1060, but PCI Express X1 and PCI Express X16 configurations are pretty close to each other. In 3D Mark TimeSpy, we see basically identical picture. Nvidia P106M is about 60% of Nvidia GTX 1060, and using PCI Express X1 connection on Asus Z87 motherboard gives us almost identical performance as we get with PCI Express X16 connection. In games though, not everything is as bright. Starting with Far Cry New Dawn, using PCI Express X1 connection, we are getting only 31 and 37 FPS. Switching to the full-sized MXM slot in the HP mini computer, we are getting 37 and 48 FPS. These values are still only about 60% of the standard GTX 1060, which delivers 56 and 72 FPS. Far Cry 6. In this much newer title, we have much worse performance using PCI Express X1 configuration. Here we are getting only 14 and 30 FPS. Using the same P106M in the HP mini computer with the full MXM slot, we are getting 40–45 FPS. It is still far from the 68 FPS which you can get with the standard GTX 1060, but it is very playable. Assassin's Creed Odyssey also shows us that PCI Express X1 is not a gaming configuration. Here, Asus Z87 with MXM to PCI Express X1 adapter delivers 19 and 32 FPS, which is significantly lower than HP mini computer, which delivers 25 and 51 FPS. The standard Nvidia GTX 1060 gives us 33 and 75 FPS, which is about 40% faster than P106M. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, we are getting almost identical picture. PCI Express X1 configuration cripples the performance of P106M, and we are getting only 17 and 32 FPS. In HP mini computer with a full-sized MXM slot, we are getting 29–43 FPS, and the standard Nvidia GTX 1060 gives us 44 and 70 FPS. Horizon Zero Dawn is a very demanding game, and here P106M limited to PCI Express X1 configuration is absolutely unplayable. This configuration delivers only 4 and 12 FPS. If I switch to a full-sized MXM slot with HP mini computer, minimal FPS is still rather slow, only 10 FPS, but the average FPS jumps to 44. Sure, it's not the best performance, but the game is playable in this configuration. With the standard GTX 1060, we are getting significantly better results, 49–79 FPS. F1 2021 also doesn't like PCI Express X1 configuration. Here, this configuration delivers 49–61 FPS. Switching to full-sized MXM slot in the HP mini computer, we are getting 79 and 94 FPS. And switching to the standard GTX 1060, the performance jumps even further, 134–162 FPS. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is the last tested game, and here PCI Express X1 configuration gives us 30–39 FPS, Full-sized MXM slot in the HP mini computer delivers 40-50 FPS, and the standard GTX 1060 gives us 56-76 FPS. Combining all these 7 tested games together, we get the following picture. Using MXM to PCI Express X1 adapter, we are getting only 23 and 35 FPS. Using an HP mini computer with a full-sized MXM slot, P106M delivers 37-54 FPS, which roughly equals to 60% of GTX 1060 6GB performance. In these 7 games, the GTX 1060 delivers 58-86 FPS. Okay, this will be enough to make a conclusion about this Nvidia P106M graphical adapter or graphical device or computing device. Since it does not have video outputs, I'm not sure if I can call it a graphics card. First of all, it is rather power efficient, only 75 watt of electricity is pretty easy to cool down. It also turns out that attaching Intel box cooler on top is rather simple, so the cooling is not a problem. And if you have a mini computer or a laptop with an MXM slot where you can physically install this large MXM module, then I think this might be a very good upgrade option if you can buy it for cheap on eBay or AliExpress. Unfortunately, not everything is as bright. First of all, I honestly thought that this P106M will perform a bit better because it is physically the same die as Nvidia GTX 1060. Unfortunately though, the technical specification of this module is far from the standard GTX 1060, thus the performance is roughly equals to 60%. In some cases it's a bit higher than 60, in other cases it's a bit lower than 60. The second disappointment is that this P106M has Nvidia decoder or encoder disabled, so you cannot use Nvidia InVanc with OBS or with Shadowplay to capture or process video using this adapter. If it would not be disabled, it might be a good option to just plug it into some background system for video processing. For this, you could even use a PCI Express X1 connection with that MXM to PCI Express X1 adapter, which you can buy for cheap. Unfortunately though, InVanc doesn't work on this P106M. And of course, there is no simple way to use these adapters with the standard computers, even if you can find it for cheap on AliExpress or eBay. The MXM to PCI Express X16 adapter costs about 150 to 200 euros, which is very unreasonable. With this price, you will be much better with the second-hand GTX 1060. And that's not all. We have more issues with this P106M. And the biggest one is that it doesn't have any display outputs. For example, with my HP mini computer, I have 3 video outputs, 2 display ports and 1 VGA. One of the display ports is connected to the MXM slot directly. And since P106M does not have any video outputs, this display port doesn't work. What is even worse is that HP BIOS is automatically picking the MXM adapter as the main adapter and trying to show the video output into the display port, which doesn't work. It means that I have to either modify the HP BIOS to figure out how to use iGPU as the primary display adapter, or I have to do the following. First, set up the BIOS the way I wanted. Second, install Windows. Third, boot into Windows and make sure that everything is working properly. After that, I power off computer, install the MXM adapter, and then I turn it on and wait until Windows boots. Windows detects that the display is connected to the iGPU and starts to show output there instead of attempting to use DisplayPort, which is not functioning with this MXM P106M. And of course, it is important to mention that P106M doesn't work with the standard Nvidia drivers. Even though the modification is very simple, it is still annoying that you need to do this modification every time you want to install updated drivers or every time you want to reinstall Windows and install the new drivers. Lastly, I would like to say that you need to check the physical dimensions of your MXM space in your laptop or your mini computer. For example, I forgot to check it and I bought my HP EliteDesk mini computer, hoping to install this into the mini computer, but the mini computer has space only for about like this. So my P106M physically doesn't fit inside. I might be doing some case modding to figure out how to put this one inside, but so far it doesn't fit. With this, let's have a few words about the future. If this video about Nvidia P106M will be successful and people will be interested in these MXM adapters, I might buy myself that expensive MXM to PCI Express X16 adapter from AliExpress to be able to test these MXM modules in the standard PCI Express X16 configuration, and I have found one interesting, which is Nvidia Tesla M6 MXM module with 8GB of video memory. For now though, that's probably all I can tell about this Nvidia P106M. Thanks for watching, I hope it was interesting, I hope it was a little bit entertaining. Bye bye.